Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So today we did a presentation. Longpa put on a presentation this morning of celebrating 20 years of Portland Friends of the Dhamma. And one thing that was put together for that was a number of our senior monks, Lumpur Sumedho, Ajahn Amaro, Ajahn Sucitto, Lumpur Pasano himself, and others, Debbie. There was Sakula had put together a video about just under an hour long, a compilation of some of our elders giving talks and reflections and encouragement for Portland Friends of the Dhamma, 20 years, and watching a few of these. And it's just how incredibly skillful beings can become when this training is followed for years, decades. It's pretty unbelievable. It's pretty amazing. It's just watching Ajahn Sucitto, and I don't even remember what he was saying, but it's just like this really strong feeling like this is just someone who's an embodiment of skillfulness. And then Lumpur Sumedho with his teachings, and just what can be said. Just with Lumpur Sumedho, what comes up for me when I think of Lumpur Sumedho is like victory, like a sense of victory, a victorious life, a life well lived, an incredibly skillful life. So we come together for practice and training, and it's like coming together in a sense of saddha, a sense of shared faith, and that's very powerful. So sometimes it's good to talk about these 8 precepts that we take every week, and it's different in the West than it is in Thailand, so the form here is different, and perhaps this will change in the future as Buddhism becomes more well established in this region, in this part of the world. And of course, in Thailand, for the villagers in the Isan, then their weekend is very much the Wanpra, day after Wanpra. Their lives are governed by when the lunar observance days fall. So here in the West, we have the Saturday, Sunday, the weekend. Certainly the lunar observance day isn't always going to be on those days, so you have a bit of dissonance sometimes. So if for the villagers in the Isan at Wapananachat, then they'll come and sit up and do the meditation vigil with the monastic community. And here, that's not always, people won't always have that opportunity. People have to work or look after their families or so on. So in Thailand, when the 8 precepts are taken, they take the 8 precepts in the morning time, and then it's like a day-long retreat for the villagers, the Wanprat, the lunar observance day. They'll take the precepts, there'll be a Dhamma talk and meal offering, and then they might have a bit of a rest, do the cleanup from the meal, have a bit of a rest, maybe start at The meal offering, of course, is earlier, so just having the one meal at 8:30 or so, and on the one pra, the meal would be after the Dhamma talk, so it might happen at 9 or 9:30. And meal cleanup, and then you might see some of the villagers mulling about or resting in the kitchen area, or they may have set up little tents for themselves. And maybe 1, 2 p.m., you'd see them doing some sitting and walking meditation in or around the meditation hall area and practicing through the day. They have some nampana, the refreshments, the tea and drinks and so on, around 4 or 5 p.m. And then they would have the evening chanting and meditation, another talk, and then the meditation vigil. So when they take the 8 precepts, they're taking it in the morning, and the idea is they're keeping the 8 precepts that whole day through until the next dawn. Then you'll see these little old ladies, 70, 80, 90 years old sometimes, who have been sitting up all night, sometimes without moving. And you'll see them wandering back to the village in the morning to give alms food to the monks on alms round. So, and then that day will be kind of a rest day. And some of them will just have a normal day. They'll just go back to work sometimes. So, remember going, and then sometimes you have after the rains retreat, after the Vasa period, you'll have Katina season, and then you might go to these different Katina ceremonies, and it's not uncommon that there's all-night Dhamma talks, and you go from monastery to monastery. You might have 2 or 3 times a week, there might be all-night Dhamma talks. And I remember going to one of these and just being super impressed by the lay people. And these farmers are just so tough and faithful and wholesome, skillful people. And remember there was this all-night Dhamma talks, and I was getting senior enough that I would be asked to give one of these talks from time to time. And I was senior enough, I was asked to give a talk, but junior enough, it would always be at 1 in the morning or 2 in the morning. It would be one of the later ones where everybody's either falling asleep or they've wandered off and are gone. There might not be as many people in the hall. So I remember getting up to give one of these talks and seeing this elderly woman there who had her hands in Anjali all night through all the talks the whole time. And just how impressive that was. And thinking, I don't know if I could do that. Hold my hands in Anjali all night through the entire vigil. So there's a sense of strong faith, shared faith. Faith can take us quite far. It's like something learned from Lumpur Pasano early on is like the difference, the way wisdom and faith works together is wisdom can only take you so far. Wisdom takes you to the edge. Faith is what actually lets go. Faith is what actually jumps off the cliff. No amount of the wisdom is like we always need to know a little bit more. We always need to have a little bit more information. But faith is that which actually goes into the unknown, goes into the new experience, goes into it goes into what we don't yet know, what we haven't experienced before. It goes out of the safe zone, it goes out of the comfort zone. Only faith can do that. We won't be able to convince ourselves. In fact, the more we try to convince ourselves, the more we might feel like we need to stay within our comfort zone. So faith is like pushing the envelope, going a little bit outside what we normally know, going outside of the box of our firmly held beliefs, perceptions. And time keeps going on, so it's almost entering the Vasa of the year 2020, and the world keeps turning and time keeps going on and the days and nights keep passing. And so it's the end of June, and it's an early Vasa this year, so Asala Puja coming up in a week's time, and that's on the 5th of July, and then the day after that we do the entering of the Vasa period, so very special time. For the monastic community, it's not really a rains retreat for us like it is in Thailand, but at the same time we do solitary retreats. It is a special time for us at Abhayagiri. We do our Vinaya study, Vinaya classes, systematic Vinaya study. It's really the only time we do full-on academic classes for ourselves, for the monastic community. And it's also the only time we do solitary retreats where we're in full solitude and we get to be real forest monks, living up in the forest. For myself, I love this experience of just eating at my kuti, having the alms bowl there and eating outside, either on the veranda or at the root of a tree. It's a very wonderful experience. And we have that luxury here at Abhayagiri. We have the luxury of being able to follow some of these Dhutanga practices. Some of the monastic community right now even are living outside, have been living outside for a period of time. Just doing things like that can really alter the experience of one's life. Just what is it like just staying outside? And we can also relate to our own practice in this way with, say, the defilements that arise in the heart, the anger, greed, and so on. Envy, jealousy, or more subtle defilements, bias, different types of views that can arise, which can be obstructive to our own peace of mind, our own practice, and trying to live outside of those, the Dhutanga of living outside of one's anger, living outside of greed, living outside of bias. It's like anger is a good example. Like it's such a unpleasant experience. Say like getting angry. I'm personally very familiar with this unpleasant experience. It's an unpleasant feeling, and anger is a natural thing that arises, and it's unpleasant when it arises. But still we give rise to it. We generate it based on the thinking and the proliferating perhaps the subtle types or not so subtle types of resentment that can build up, say, well, living in a group, living in community, or just living in society in general. So this thing, anger, it builds up and it's unpleasant. And just as an experiment, we can even, we've read these teachings of the Buddha, metta is non-anger. But yet there's still this kind of pull, this draw to anger or resentment. And why does that happen? It's irrational, it's unpleasant. Or perhaps the thought process is very rational, but it's giving rise to anger, so why do we do that? And then if we're able to then not focus so much on the thought process, but on the feeling itself, on the unpleasantness of that itself, so we can start to learn to live outside of that. So it's quite interesting. But that takes like a sense of daring, a sense of going outside of our normal box that we create for ourselves. So it's like looking at that unpleasant feeling, and there might be a sense of anger or a sense of being frustrated or upset, and then it's like rather than continuing to generate the thoughts which are giving rise to that unpleasantness, then actually starting by looking at the feeling, noting its unpleasantness, and then trying to give rise to some sort of wholesome proliferation, such as a feeling of faith, or such as an image of that lady holding her hands in Anjali all night, and looking to see what happens, so shifting the mind from a unwholesome object to a wholesome object, and seeing what happens. And it can be quite extraordinary, the sudden shift when say anger is let go of. It can be quite interesting in that it's like quite pleasant, quite amazing, it can be exceedingly pleasant to the point that we might think, how could I have ever gotten angry in the first place? So the Buddha talks about this, but then experientially it's like, wow, how could I have ever done that to myself? It's that was so unpleasant, and letting go of it feels so good. How can I do that? But then lose mindfulness, do it again, it happens again, and again and again. But if we start to see that it can be let go of through a shifting from that focus on the sankharas, the thoughts that are generating it, going to the feeling, and then using that as a shift into a more of a wholesome sankhara or proliferation. That's also a function of mindfulness, knowing that that's happening, knowing that feeling is there. It's also connected with like the Dhamma in the sense of like its freedom. One starts to become free of that, no longer a slave to that defilement or that. It's like we know we can use that training to shift out of it. And then we can do it again and again and again, and then catch it quicker and quicker each time. But it takes practice, it takes a lot of training. It takes a lot of mindfulness and a sense of like dogged perseverance. That's where these senior monks that watching in this video today, that's what we see now, that's where it comes from, is years and decades of that over and over and over again. And slipping up and falling back and then picking ourselves back up and keep going. It's like the image I like to use a lot of where Ajahn Mahabua said that the practice is like, you're just like, it's like you start out running, but then you slip and fall and you fall on your face, and then you get up and you're walking for a while and stumbling forward, and then you fall again and you're being dragged through the mud sometimes, and then you get up and you're crawling for a while, and then you're walking for a while, and it's just like that. But you keep moving forward. Because the moment we give up, then we're not moving forward anymore. So we keep moving forward, we keep developing mindfulness, and keep meditating, keeping the precepts, and keep developing ourselves, keep studying the suttas, keep doing the chanting, keep doing the bowing. When we go up to our kuti, the first thing we do is bow. When we go into our kuti, when we leave our kuti, we bow. When we wake up in the morning, first thing we do is bow. Come into the hall, bow. Go in for breakfast, bow. Go in for the meal, bow. After the meal, bow again. So this sense of bowing, this sense of, when we bow, we establish mindfulness. And then each bow is like a little drop in the bucket of our merit that we build up. And eventually we build up a stream of merit. And the Buddha also talks about like the importance of tapping into a stream of merit through our practice. There's like different suttas where the Buddha talks about streams of merit, streams of the wholesome. So like recollection of Buddha being a stream of merit, stream of the wholesome, recollection of Dhamma, recollection of Sangha, recollection of one's own virtue, one's own generosity, recollection of the devas. These are different streams of merit, streams of the wholesome, that when we recollect them and we enter into them, these are streams that when we're in them, they increase and they ripen in heaven and they mature in release. So the Buddha highlighting that importance of these different recollections, and through these recollections, through these different contemplations, actually generating blessings, actually creating blessings. Or even mindfulness is a very special type of kamma that we're creating through mindfulness. So it's like normally we're the normal, say if you talk about like in terms of being like worldly or unworldly, a worldly mind will follow along with attraction or aversion, and it will just habitually follow attraction, seek it out, be repelled, and then be repelled by things that are unpleasant, that give rise to aversion. So there's that being buffeted around or blown around by these worldly winds, praise and blame, status, loss of status, and so on, pleasure, pain, gain and loss, and we get buffeted around by these things. And then mindfulness, what it's doing is it's starting to reflect on and see the process as it's happening. So there's like a stepping back and a putting space around these things. So with mindfulness, rather than automatically being pulled towards an object of attraction, we're seeing how the mind gets pulled towards an object of attraction, and we're developing a reflective or contemplative mind, the mind of a samana. And if we have that mind toward, say, aversion, then there's a object of aversion and we feel repelled by it. So we can't yet stop the mind from being repelled, but we see that process of being repelled or being pushed, being pulling away from something because of it being unpleasant. So we start to see and contemplate that process and develop the mind of a samana. We put space around it, and that's the beginning. That's the starting to free ourselves from that process of being pushed back and forth by feeling, pushed back and forth by the pleasant and the unpleasant. Probably Luang Por Liam's favorite word is feeling. Just Kwam Rusak. Just everything is Kwam Rusak. Everything is feeling. Feeling is like, and it's so simple to talk about it or to read about it, to study about it. But it's everything. It's what's conditioning us, conditioning our direction in life, conditioning our decisions. It's just pleasant and unpleasant feeling. I'll always remember this talk that Luang Por Liam gave here. It was, I think it was in 2004, and it was when we had just put this Buddha image in place up at the ordination platform up above, and we'd done like a relic enshrinement behind that in the halo, at the rear end of the halo of that Buddha image, and Luang Por Liam giving a talk about the pleasant and the unpleasant, and that there's these different default reactions or default modes that the mind has, and so when there's an unpleasant feeling, the default is aversion. So that's the default. When there's a pleasant feeling, the default is attraction. When there's a neutral feeling, the default is either delusion, or which is connected with the sense of self, or a desire for attraction or aversion. And also, when we suffer, the default is to criticize. When we're happy, the default is to praise. So that always stuck with me. It's like when I start to see that in myself, like, so I can trace it back. Like when I'm critical, oh wait, I can trace that back. Okay, there's some dukkha there. There's some suffering that needs to be addressed. When I'm in a mode of praising, okay, there's happiness and well-being there. That's interesting. Where did that come from? How did that come about? So with mindfulness, we're putting space around all these things, and we're investigating and contemplating all these things. So mindfulness is a very interesting sankhara. It's a very interesting condition that we give rise to, which starts to move toward freedom. But yeah, then to be very forgiving with ourselves. The practice is difficult. The mind is going to resist. The heart is going to resist this kind of training because it's just habituated to being the way it's always been. So like when there's hunger or tiredness, just these basic things, just connected with having a body. It's like just really tired, just want to go take a rest, or I just want to get away, I just want to just have a break. I just want to have a break. And that's one of the awful and horrible things about samsara. There's no breaks. There's no breaks from dukkha. Until we're free of it, there's no breaks. Okay, I'm just going to take a rest and then I'll be okay. And then I have to wake up again. Dukkha. I just want to sleep and not wake up. I just want to go and have good dreams and have that be it. Okay, I have to wake up again. I have to deal with life. I have to deal with the body. I have to eat. I have to, have to do all these duties. Maybe if I ordained, then it would be okay. Oh, well, that's work. Okay. That didn't make it any easier. Actually, maybe it made it more difficult. Okay, well, okay, maybe if I leave, it'll be okay. So mindfulness, the Buddha talks about mindfulness, and that's the path. We follow that with faith. We need quite a bit of faith to be able to get through this sense of like, just got to do the work. There's just no other way. We just got to do the work, and just got to put in the time, put in the effort, follow the Noble Eightfold Path, do all these recollections. It's difficult. It's going to be dukkha, but it's got to be done. One way to practice metta that I found useful sometimes is from the Tibetan tradition, actually, and thought of bringing that up a little bit tonight as well. Is one of these things, because I always had this trouble with practicing metta for myself. Like practicing metta for others was not so bad, but practicing metta for myself was always difficult, and I always felt like maybe I'm being selfish, or maybe that's, I don't need metta for myself. I'm going to do the real practice, metta for others, and I'm going to do austerities. But found that metta for myself was pretty difficult, so having some skillful methods or skillful means to cultivate this has been helpful. One is actually thinking of ourselves in the past. So bringing up some sort of memory of ourselves, of a time when we were really suffering. So like bringing up a time can be recent past or way in the past, some sort of extreme difficulty, extreme suffering, extreme injustice, or whatever that we underwent, that we experienced. And then actually generating goodwill with our present self for that past self of ours. So objectifying that past self of ours as that suffering being. And then sending goodwill as if it's another person. So sending goodwill to our past self. So when we're able to generate goodwill for ourselves in the past, just seeing ourselves in a sorry state or a state of suffering in the past, and may you be well, may you be free of this. And then saying, okay, now I'm here in the present, I'm doing better than that, so I am free of that, so may I be well in the present. May I be free of whatever residual is still there. And then doing this practice of then imagining ourselves in the future content, happy, well, at ease, and delighting in having mudita for our future self. The metta worked, imagining that it worked. And this is a skillful means to try to convince ourselves that metta works, that we're actually able to have metta for ourselves. And so, yeah, I just found that kind of method useful for starting to develop it. Or we can come up with something on our own. Come up with, these are called upaya, or skillful means. We have to get creative in our practice and come up with some way to bring ourselves to a state of ease, a state of mindfulness. Kind of interesting too to reflect on like how the practice changes or matures over the years, and how life also changes over the years, and how there's these different modalities in terms of sometimes there's strong becoming, sometimes there's a wish for accomplishment, and then sometimes as things change and shift over the years, over the decades, then there might be a stepping back. Less of a becoming. Sometimes we might feel like we need to develop things or have certain qualities we need to give rise to. Sometimes it might just be a sense of, okay, now I'm just going to rest in awareness, rest and have a sense of ease and spaciousness, and just enjoy that for the time being and allow myself to have that. Or there may be a time where things need to be dealt with. There might be issues that need to be resolved. Once that passes, okay, that's passed, and then just coming back to a sense of ease and spaciousness, awareness. So as the days and nights pass, then we slowly develop ourselves in this way. So it's just recollecting 20 years of Portland Friends of the Dhamma. That was just bringing up some interesting Dhamma recollections, and just thinking about skillfulness and mindfulness, and how do we develop things like metta? How do we let go of things like anger? And these are just some ideas that wanting to share and hoping they might be helpful for this evening. So I'll just leave it at that for this evening.